Remember when we were kids? Finger paints and macaroni necklaces. Like, we didn't stress about being creative back then. We just did stuff.
Right.
So why does it feel like now everybody's got to be creative? Like it's this magic key to a good job or a happy life,
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at this NPR podcast, Throughline, and the episode is called The Cult of Creativity.
Interesting.
And get this, the whole idea of creativity, like we think of it now, might be a pretty new thing.
That is fascinating. This whole idea of creativity as we know it, it's a surprisingly recent invention.
So the podcast takes us back in time to see how we got so obsessed with creativity.
Yeah. And a big part of that, I think, is looking at the Cold War.
Uh-huh.
All those anxieties back then about technology, everyone being the same, and what it meant to be American.
Okay.
That had a huge impact on how we see creativity now.
So you're saying the Cold War is why you spend 20 minutes trying to come up with a clever Instagram caption?
Well, maybe not directly, but it definitely set the stage.
Okay.
Americans wanted to prove they were better than the Soviet Union, not just with, technology, but with ideas too.
Yeah.
Creativity showed American ingenuity and being an individual.
So it's like this way to be different from the Soviets, who everyone thought were all the same.
Exactly.
Wow.
Creativity became a powerful weapon in the Cold War. It showed off American freedom and all the cool new stuff they were coming up with.
And there's this note the podcast talks about, a speech in 1950 by J.P. Guilford, the president of the American Psychological Association.
Okay.
He basically told all the psychologists they needed to study creativity.
Wow.
He said that the usual intelligence tests, they weren't enough to find the really smart people America needed.
Wow. He was really ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He knew creativity was key to succeeding, especially as technology was getting more and more advanced.
Right.
He saw it as this thing that made us humans different from machines.
And that fear of being replaced by machines, I mean, that's still a big thing today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Think about all the talk about AI and robots taking jobs.
Oh, yeah. That tension between humans coming up with new ideas and technology getting better, it keeps coming up over and over in history. And what Guilford said back in the 50s, it really shaped how we think about creativity now, from schools to the workplace.
Speaking of the workplace, the podcast talked about how businesses really grabbed onto this idea of creativity.
Yeah.
They figured out it was a way to make more money.
Exactly. They saw that creativity could lead to all sorts of new products and services. They started thinking about ways to help their workers be more creative.
Like brainstorming.
Yeah.
The podcast tells this awesome story about how brainstorming was actually invented by an advertising guy in the 40s.
Oh, it's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
So Alex Osborne, this ad man, he wanted a system to come up with fresh ideas.
Right.
And the big thing was quantity over quality. Like, just throw out any idea, no matter how crazy it sounded. No judging.
So it was almost like they were trying to be all free-flowing like artists, but inside a company where everything has rules. But the podcast also sort of hints that maybe there's a not-so-good side to this. Like maybe companies were more into getting valuable ideas from their workers than actually encouraging real creativity.
Yeah, that's a big issue. There's this constant push and pull, right?
Right.
We want people to be creative, but then we want to control those ideas and make money from them.
Yeah.
And, that's something we'll keep talking about as we go deeper into this episode.
So it seems like we went from hardly ever talking about creativity to everybody needing to be creative. Did we kind of lose what the word even means?
It's a good question. When something gets as popular as this idea of creativity, it's going to lose some of its punch.
And this guy, Sam Franklin, who they interviewed on the podcast, he said something that really stuck with me. He said, even though creativity feels overused now, it was actually made up to be for everybody.
Yeah, the idea was to get rid of that old-fashioned snobby idea of genius. They wanted to say that anyone can be creative, like it was supposed to be a good thing, opening it up to more people.
I get that.
Yeah.
But it also feels like what Franklin was saying, that push to make it for everyone also made creativity into something you could buy and sell, just like anything else.
Exactly. That brings us back to those ideas of the creative class and the creative economy. Those terms, as smart as they sound, they often hide the real stuff about money and society that decide who gets called creative and who benefits from that label.
And it made me think, we always think of creative jobs as like artists, writers, musicians. But what about all the creativity people use every day at work, with their families, even in their hobbies? Does that count?
That's a fantastic point, and it goes right to what Franklin's arguing for in the podcast.
Yeah.
He's saying we need to think bigger about what creativity is beyond those normal categories.
Right.
He wants us to think about the creativity in solving problems, taking care of others, just dealing with life's craziness.
So maybe it's less about what you make and more about how you think, your attitude toward the world.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a powerful idea because then creativity is open to anyone, no matter their job or where they're from.
Right.
It becomes less about making something brand new or super innovative and more about being curious and willing to try things out.
This brings us to the big thing nobody wants to talk about. Artificial intelligence. If machines can make art, music, even write poems, what does that even mean for us being creative? Does it make us less creative? Or do we just have to come up with a new idea of what being creative means?
Oh, that's one of the most interesting questions from the podcast. And Franklin makes a really smart point. He says AI can definitely make new stuff, but it doesn't have those things that make us human.
Yeah.
Judgment, taste, understanding how others feel.
So it's like AI can make stuff that's technically amazing, but it might not really connect with us on a deeper level. It's missing that human touch, you know?
That's a great way to put it. And it means that even with AI getting better all the time, there's still a really important place for human creativity.
Because in the end, it's not just about making something new. It's about making something that means something that connects to being human.
Exactly. And that's where the real power of creativity is.
Yeah.
And as we go deeper into this world with AI everywhere, it's even more important to recognize and grow those things that make us humans unique.
So if we're starting to question this whole cult of creativity thing, what do we do instead? Where do we go from here?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the podcast gives us some really interesting ideas. Franklin says maybe it's time to stop being so obsessed with newness just for the sake of being new.
Okay.
What if, instead of always chasing after the latest thing, we started to value other things in our creative work?
Like beauty, meaning making things useful, connecting with others.
Yeah, exactly. Those are all things that can make us want to create, even if the thing we make isn't seen as brand new or a breakthrough.
I really like that. It takes the pressure off. You know, it's not about proving how good you are or trying to be different from everyone else. It's about making things that matter to you, things that make the world a little better.
It's about taking control of our creativity and using it to actually make a difference.
So maybe instead of stressing about having to be creative all the time, we can be more mindful and intentional about it.
Yeah. And maybe that change in how we think will lead us to a deeper, more satisfying relationship with creativity.
Franklin calls this getting free from the tyranny of novelty. And that really hit me. It's like we're so focused on the new and the different that we've forgotten about other things that might be just as important, maybe even more important.
It's about realizing that true creativity isn't just about making new stuff. It's about having a creative mindset, a way of looking at the world with curiosity and being willing to experiment. It's about finding joy and meaning in creating, no matter what the outcome is.
That's a much bigger and more empowering way to think about creativity.
Right.
It's not about fitting into some box or trying to get people to say you're good. It's about tapping into your own potential and using it to do something meaningful.
And that's a message that really speaks to people, especially in a world where we're always hearing about what it means to be successful and happy. It reminds us that creativity isn't some finish line you cross. It's a journey.
I like that. Creativity is a journey. It's not about reaching some goal. It's about enjoying the process, the exploring, the learning that happens along the way.
And that journey is for everyone, no matter how old you are, where you come from, or what talents you think you have.
That's a really beautiful thought. It reminds us that creativity isn't some special gift for a few lucky people. It's something we all have inside us. It's like we're finally allowed to decide for ourselves what creativity means.
And that's one of the best things about this Through Line episode. It's like they're saying, break free from all those rules we've put on ourselves and each other.
Yeah, like we've been so busy trying to fit into this tiny box of what creativity is supposed to be,
Right.
that we forgot how much fun it is just to make stuff, think about new things, express ourselves.
Yeah, and that fun is for everyone, whether you're like painting a masterpiece or just, trying a new recipe,
Right.
writing a poem, or building a birdhouse with your grandkids. It's all about that thing inside us, humans, that makes us want to create, to, change the world around us a little bit, to leave our mark.
So maybe the real question isn't, am I creative?
Right.
It's more like, what do I enjoy doing? What do I feel like making? And why am I doing it?
I think that's a great way to look at it. It takes the focus off of what other people think
Yeah.
and puts it back on why we like to create in the first place.
Yeah. And it reminds us that creativity isn't about getting to some specific result. It's about the journey,
Yeah.
the experimenting, the learning, all that stuff that happens along the way.
And in a world where everyone's always talking about results and achievements, and it's nice to remember that the journey itself can be just as important as what you end up with.
It's like we're being told it's okay to play again, to try things out, to enjoy those aha moments that make being creative so rewarding.
Yeah.
Who knows what incredible things we could come up with if we just had that kind of open mind.
I think that's the key, that openness and curiosity.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive. I feel like I'm looking at creativity in a whole new way.
I'm glad to hear that. And I hope it makes you feel like you can be creative in your own way, whatever that looks like for you.
So to all our listeners out there, we hope you keep thinking about this stuff. We'll put a link to the Throughline episode in the show notes so you can check it out if you want to go even deeper.
And we always love to hear what you think.
Yeah, what really hit home for you? What are your hopes and fears about what's happening with creativity?
Tell us about it on social media or send us an email.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep creating.